I guess I will stop a bit here to tell you about just exactly how Arcomage Clone itself is different from the original Arcomage and from earlier Arcomage Clone versions. Well, where should I start? Well, on the whole, Arcomage Clone uses standalone Arcomage. Like I mentioned, it's officially Arcomage 3.0 by 3DO. It was released in 2000, I believe, or something like that. It uses the rules from there, which means that you get resources before your turn, not after, like it is in Arcomage. And also, you need to get all of the resources to the specified amount, and not just one of them to get a resource victory. Now that actually changes from Arcomage version to other Arcomage version, between Might and Magic VII, Might and Magic VIII, and the standalone Arcomage 3.0, the original one. But in this case I decided to have by default that you have to get every resource to 500 in order to win. Otherwise the enemy would have already won a long time ago. But it's still a configurable value, so if you want to play with those alternative rules, you can configure that. And here you can see the enemy using Prism to a pretty good effect, actually. The enemy does not need Power Burn at all. They have way too many gems as it is, so they discarded it. That's one of the things that I upgraded in Arcomage Clone, the latest version. The AI is actually pretty decent now. So anyway, what else? Now, one thing that is different in Arcomage Clone compared to standalone Arcomage 3.0 is that, well, as I mentioned earlier, I believe, you cannot go lower than one from all of the resource generators. Otherwise, it's not very fair. So, yeah. Okay, so what makes Arcomage Clone special on the whole? Well, even from the start, it was special for its compatibility. Now, nowadays, if you want to play the original Arcomage 3.0, for one, you have to play on Windows only. You cannot play it from other platforms without special tools. Also, you have to set your screen depths to 16-bit or lower, as opposed to 24 or pseudo 32-bit depths of current day screens. On Linux you can play it using Wine, but it includes doing some really nasty hacks to get it working, and in the end the performance is rather abysmal anyway. And in contrast, Arcomage Clone runs on any screen depth, on both Windows and Linux, and on both 32-bit and 64-bit architectures. And in fact, right now, you are looking at the game running natively on Linux, using the 64-bit architecture. You can see that right now, as I break the fourth wall. You can see that this is OpenSUSE with KDE, as you can probably tell if you're knowledgeable about things like that from KWin window decorations. Anyway, what makes Arcomage Clone on the whole special, even more, is that it's completely free and open source. In fact, it is licensed under the GNU Public License version 3. aka GPL v3. That means that anyone can look at the source code of this game and change it to suit their needs, except for monetary gain. What is more, the game is portable. It has no installer, and it doesn't need one. On Linux, the packages for various distributions will be provided later on once the game matures, and in the meanwhile I have included precompiled binaries for it in the download. And also Rock Launcher. Anyway, people who are following this project probably noticed that it has been around half a year since the last release of Arcomage Clone, which was, I believe, version 0.3.2. And now it is version, I believe, 1.alpha.12.04. Though I'm recording this a little bit earlier before the release, so I'm not sure if it will change or not. So what changed during that time? Well, actually a whole lot. For the most part, the changes were in the background. Like, as you could see while I was playing the game, well, this is pretty stock Arcomage, you know? Nothing too fancy. So... Wow, what? The AI is on a roll here! Calm down there, buddy! And also, yeah, that's a graphical glitch. I cannot be bothered with fixing that right now, because it's very rare, as you can see. Anyway, what was I talking about? Oh yeah, what changed during the time that no releases were made. Well, first of all, Arcomage Clone is no longer a single application. It has been split into a backend, or a library, and a frontend, or a user interface. That allowed me to make the game even more accessible. Now, it's easier accessible for anyone who might want to create a custom frontend for the game, as all the game logic and configuration is handled by the backend. So essentially that means that developers who want to create custom frontends no longer have to bother with the core logic and can just focus purely on input and output. There's also an API in order for them to do that conveniently. What is more, the split made it more accessible for some users, as I have created another frontend for the game myself, and I called it Arcomage, or command line Arcomage. That can run on machines that are either extremely limited on resources or don't have a graphical server running, or of course for people who like command line input in general. That also helps me when debugging game logic, as by using it I can be sure that a bug is in the game logic rather than a graphical glitch. Like you saw there was a graphical glitch, and the split between a front and a backend lets me identify where the problem occurs quite easily. Yeah, so if you're interested in Arcomage, I think I will put a link to it in the description so you can see that. Just note that it's also quite old and I haven't updated it in a while, so yeah. What else? Wow, also I don't have really good cards here. Oh well. Another important change that happened behind the scenes is a change in the main programming language. Now, originally the game was written in C, which, as you might know, is a rather low-level programming language. By today's standards, it's really inflexible, and although its speed gives an advantage when the program is complex, for a game such as Arcomage Clone, it's just an unnecessary burden. So what I did when splitting up the game into a frontend and a backend is rewrite the backend in the D programming language, which is a high-level programming language, and it's my language of choice. It allows me to create features a lot faster and easier than C ever could. And since it's compatible with code written in C, I kept the main graphical frontend still written in C due to its compatibility with complex libraries, such as Simple Direct Media Layer, or SDL. Also, yay for Prism. Why did I do that? That was a very bad thing to do. Anyway, so what has changed that you can actually notice? The most important feature of the backend that you can notice is mod support. Yes, now everyone, even without any programming knowledge, can create their own custom cards in the game by utilizing Lua scripts. All of the cards, in fact, used in the game have also been converted into Lua scripts to serve as an example, and something you can edit in order to experiment with the cards. You can go to the Lua directory of the game and to the Arcomage card pool directory, and then see just exactly what every card does, and you can use it as an example to create your own cards. What makes Lua scripting very useful for the likes of Arcomage Clone is that it's a scripting language and it's interpreted. So you don't have to recompile anything, and you don't need any extra software for creating your own cards, or of course editing the already existing ones. So that makes mod making quite easy, accessible to pretty much everyone, and it also makes the game very much replayable. You're really only limited by your own imagination here. Okay, another exciting new feature that is included in this release is improved AI support. I already noted that the AI was being quite smart in some of the things that it does. That's because I completely revamped the AI code, and in earlier versions of Arcomage Clone and in the original Arcomage, the AI was really quite silly. Oftentimes outright suicidal. It would use, say, Discord when it had lower than 7 tower. That would get itself killed, and similar things like that. And now with the new AI code, the AI does no longer do that. It will never do anything to hurt itself, and also carefully weighs each card before playing it. That means that the game is now a lot more challenging, and therefore a lot more fun too. What is more, the AI can be controlled through Lua scripts as well, which means that if you find something that the AI does wrong, you can correct that mistake on the fly. And you can also make the AI use your newly created cards with ease. So, effectively, what I mean by that is that the cards here, well, the AI uses per card logic. That means that every card has certain priorities defined in its AI code that you can change through Lua scripts, and the computer will always play the highest priority card it has in its hand at the same time. So that means that any cards you create, you can use to actually make the game know how to handle your custom cards. So that's very useful. Now, if you're wondering about what strategies the AI is already using, well, general strategies, that is, that are not dependent on cards themselves, consider that the AI, if it sees that your tower is nearly destroyed, it will favor attack cards. If it sees that its tower is close to defeat by tower destruction, it will favor building cards. And also, if it's close to a resource victory, it will rather discard cards than play them, in order to not risk losing the advantage in resources. Like, you saw the AI discarding one card that gave it more magic, so that was because it was ultimately pointless. They already have too much magic. So yeah, there are a few more strategies that the AI can use, but those are the general ones. And of course, like I said, every card has its own independent strategy thing. But yeah, I lost! Yay! And yeah, that's another bug, and I'm not sure what's causing that, actually. It's just like 1010 gems there. Anyways, so I now can focus more about saying what the game has in store. Well, this version of the game, anyway. So the AI, it's quite smart now. Like you saw earlier in this preview of the game, it could use things like Elven Scout and Prism with pretty good efficiency, unlike in pretty much every other Arcomage game where the AI had no idea how to do that. So yeah. Now the backend was not the only part that went through a rewrite. Despite the fact that the graphical frontend is still written in C, as I have explained earlier, it also went through a rewrite. Now earlier it used pure SDL for rendering. You probably don't know about things like that, but if you use pure SDL for rendering everything, it allows you to render a piece of graphic on the screen and nothing else. For an extensible game like Arcomage Clone, that was not enough. Therefore, I decided to migrate to OpenGL via SDL, which allows a lot more flexibility, well, at the cost of lower level programming, but I managed to successfully do that, so that stage is done. And now that allowed me to use a lot higher quality resources for the game, as scaling graphics is now done on the fly, instead of it having to be pre-rendered. So many resources, such as card backgrounds, like you see here, are now twice their original size and quality, as well as perfectly scalable all the way up to resolutions of around 1200p. These ones are actually downscaled to fit the resolution. The original resolution of these cards are twice this size, so like that. Now, if you recall how the original Archmage, or earlier versions of Arcomage Clone looked like, you might remember that it used a resolution of merely 640 on 480. If you noticed, currently Arcomage Clone is using 800 on 600 as its slowest resolution. And in the future, the resolution will be unlocked, so you will be able to use any resolution you want, and still keep a sharp picture. Now already all of the code is written in a resolution independent way, and instead of using set size fonts for the text, it generates the fonts on the fly to have it as sharp as possible. Basically, if these fonts were pre-rendered, like it was in earlier Arcomage Clone versions, if you scaled up the window, you would see pixelation on the font. Now, since I'm using TrueType fonts that are generated from a font file on the fly, that means that upscaling everything will keep the font absolutely sharp, like you see right now. Also, the increase in resolution allowed me to actually introduce this whole upper row of cards. Earlier, you could not see the cards of the enemy. They shared the space with your own cards here. And this change allows me to actually implement some more features in the future that I'll explain a bit later. Okay. So right now you cannot change the resolution, but that's basically because I haven't tested out just how well different resolutions work, and I don't want to enable it right now if I haven't tested that. And even if I did, it will probably break horribly and probably even crash the game, so I don't want that. Now, the current version of the game also sports a whole lot of bug fixes and enhancements when compared to the earlier versions of Arcomage Clone. Well, for one, due to a pre-caching system, it should be faster and eat less energy. However, it's still incomplete at this point, so it could be still somewhat taxing on the resources. I believe it uses around 20% of one core or something like that, even when it's idle. Well, somewhat lower actually. It's 20% when it's when you move around your mouse like that. But you can expect some more improvements in that field as the game matures. As you noticed during the game, it has support for very smooth card animation. Neither the originals nor the older version of Arcomage Clone ever had such fluid card animations. That's because earlier the card animations were based on steps. Basically, every card had to go to where it had to go in 10 steps. And now it uses a time-based system in that it has an unlimited amount of steps, and the only thing that defines just how long the animations should take is a number that, well, controls the time. So you will be able to change the speed of animations later on in later alpha versions. Okay, what else? Well, there are miscellaneous other small features, such as cards being placed at random height. You can see that, for example, this card is lower than that card, and other things like that. And the fact that cards move like to the middle and then on the table, and then also a new card is dispensed from the card bank. Like, things like that are well, they make the game closer to the original, and also a lot more visually appealing. Because really, all these small details, they really add up, and they can change the feel of the game quite a lot. So that sums up all the main features in the game that are implemented up to this point. However, that is not all of the features that will be included in the final version of Arcomage Clone. Well, after all, this is the first alpha of the game. So there are certain important features, such as sound, and hot seat game support that have not been implemented or have been broken in this release, but will be fixed in the future. And there are also features that are planned for later alpha versions. Well, there's support for all of the cards and most of the features that Arcomage, multiplayer Archmage, currently supports. Also note that since this is an alpha version, it's more than possible that there are some serious bugs to be found in the game. Now, I did my best to ensure that all of the critical bugs are fixed, but don't be surprised if you find some other miscellaneous bug. However, if you do, please report to me, because all feedback is really welcome. Right now, since it's alpha, the feature requests are also welcome. But make sure you request some features before the game reaches the beta phase, because at beta, I will be only accepting bug reports. For more information about the different development phases, or if you're just interested in the way I version the game now, see my document on my own versioning system that I use for this project. I'll link it in the description. Know that you can report bugs to either the release thread or to my issue trackers directly. Now, if you choose the latter option, know that due to the split into the backend and the frontend, any bugs or requests about game logic, well, such as cards not doing what is written on them, should go into lib Arcomage, and anything that concerns graphics and input, such as graphical glitches that you saw, should go into Arcomage Clone. And finally, something that probably some of you have been wondering by now, where can you download the game? Well, the links are also in the description. Know that you can always find the latest version of the game, although less stable, as well as the full source code of the game in the Git repository of the Arcomage Clone project, a link to which is also included in the description. There are a few repositories. I probably will add a short description about each of them so that you could know just exactly what every repository is about. So yeah, that concludes this preview video. I hope you enjoy playing the game if you're interested in it and decide to give it a try. Now, if you do, please leave some feedback, especially bug reports. They're very valuable. And yes, that's all I want to say. See you all next time. Later.